Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. As a courtesy to your fellow attendees, please silence your mobile devices for the duration of the program. Please be sure to pick up a headset from the tables located near the doors. Channel information will appear on the screen. Thank you. Please welcome Moderator for the Sustainable Communities Breakout Session, Director of City Planning and Infrastructure from the City of Melbourne, Geoff Lawler.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on sustainable communities. Firstly, may I, on my behalf and on your behalf, thank Mayor Tao and the City of Johannesburg for their hospitality in having us here. It has been wonderful. Our agenda today, we have 5 speakers, including myself, from a fairly diverse region across the world. We'll be talking to you about our experiences around the notion of sustainable communities. And we will have time for questions and answers after all of the speakers have made their presentation. And please make sure when we do get to that point, if you're asking a question, wait for the microphone to come to you because this is all being recorded. Sustainable communities are, I suspect, the reason we all work in local government. For our communities. What we would like for our communities is to be able to live well, to participate in society, to take the opportunity for personal development and for their families, to help each other and to provide for future generations. But increasingly, as we all know, and the reason we're here today, we're having to live not only within our human means, but within the means that the environment provides for us. And we also have to be very careful that the way in which we grow on this planet, that we exercise stewardship for future generations. And fundamentally, that's what sustainable communities are about. You can see on the screen a snapshot of from the Climate Action and Megacities report of the actions that all of the cities in C40 are taking that perhaps could be said to be towards this direction of sustainable communities. I think they are a wonderful expression of the fact that local governments do care for their communities. Within that context, I'd firstly like to tell you a little bit about Melbourne. Melbourne is a city that is growing in population, and it's growing quite fast at the moment. The bar chart that you can see on the side is the daily population in the city of Melbourne, which is at the heart of the greater metropolitan area. And essentially we are enjoying a daily population of around about 800,000 people on an average working day. Sometimes that gets to 1 million people. My council, its plan, its wish, its aspiration, its dedication for those people is that it wishes Melbourne to be a prosperous city, a creative city, a knowledge city, a connected city, a people city, and an eco-city. And our task for that council is to find ways in which we can achieve that, all of those aims within the actions that we take. So that on the positive side, growth is a great aspect, a great thing to have, and particularly an aspect of the economy that goes with that growth is that 70% of the jobs in our inner city can be now categorised as being knowledge economy jobs. So that opportunity for personal development is profound. It also brings a greater understanding and requirement of our community for that stewardship and for that social inclusion that they are all looking for. On the negative side, the impact of climate change for our city is that we will experience an increasingly drying climate, so therefore water becomes even more precious than it is now, and paradoxically the increased chance of more severe storms leading to potential inundation impacts. Those two things are what we must provide for in the environment that is shaping for us. On the other hand, the challenges are rising costs of housing, transport, energy and water. So our challenge is how can we provide for that growth in a way to deal with all of those impacts and accentuate the positive nature of the people who are choosing to live in that inner city that you can see on the photograph to the left. One way in which we're doing that is, and have been and will continue for probably the next 30 or 40 years, is to have redevelopment on brownfield sites which are very close to the original CBD. These are sites which have formerly been used for transport purposes, and there are very large areas of land which can become available. The trick will be, will we develop them the way they were developed in the 19th century or the 20th century, or will they be developed in a 21st century way which accentuates, we believe, localism, something that is important for the people, that they can put their fingers on, that is tangible to them. What opportunity do they have to actually control their inputs and outputs, the way in which they choose to interact? Will we have embedded energy in those sites? Will we have integrated water management? We'd suggest there is frankly no alternative. We must, but getting to that point requires dealing with a lot of barriers that are actually about history and tradition and the way things were done in the past. So that search for the new and that search for the clever is a really important thing for what we do, and we are benefited by having that knowledge economy. One of the key things in this notion of localism is making sure that any infrastructure investment actually is for multiple purposes, not simply for the primary purpose. So if water retention facilities are going to be put in to capture stormwater, then that will be beneficial for managing flood, but it will also be beneficial in terms of wiser use of water and directing that back into parks and trees and environments where people can enjoy societal inclusion. For example, if a library is created, it's not just a traditional library, it's also a key meeting place for communities to interact with each other and to take ownership of the space within which they live, thereby adding to the safety of the places that they live in. Incredibly important for us, because we have limited authority in all of this, is our ability to work with other parts of the community. And one particular part of the community that is very important to our circumstance are the universities. In the Municipality of Melbourne, the inner city area, 42% of the residents are students. We have representation of, I think it's 9 Australian universities, all in very close to the CBD. This is an extraordinary powerhouse for our way forward. And in particular, the University of Melbourne is setting itself as being a centre for Australian urban research. We are seeking on the back of that to see how we can perhaps introduce that academic community, which is so important for the way in which we do things, into the C40 network, and potentially be important to the other cities in the network as well. This week, in fact, exactly this week, the University of São Paulo is engaging with the University of Melbourne in Melbourne, looking at setting up a program for urban research into the precinct that you see on the map in front of you. That's one of the new growth precincts that my council has set, and these 2 universities, which represent 2 cities in this network, have decided here is an important place for research to find that new and better ways of doing things. So my key point, I guess, for sustainable communities is let's not neglect this very powerful tool that we all have at our disposal of our academia. The challenges ahead for us are really what's old. What was the way things were done in the past? Typically, the way things were done in the past in our city is big grids, big solutions, big transmission of energy, very heavy reliance on coal to run everything, very substantial reserves of coal, in fact. So if what I have been talking about is going to happen, then it's going to have to require different ways of thinking at how communities are sustained into the future, ways in which the people who want to live in this space can feel as though they are being environmentally responsible, not only to them, to themselves and to their families and to their neighbours, but also to the world that they want to work, live and inhabit. And that, I think, is the puzzle that we're trying to unlock. Our key strength are the people who want to do these things and being able to help them, how they might be able to achieve it through better ways, working in unison, or with some support and regulatory direction. That's Melbourne's story. Thank you. I'd now like to invite up to share the story of the city of São Paulo, the Vice Mayor Nádia Campeão. Please make her welcome.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas. Em nome da cidade de São Paulo e do prefeito Fernando Haddad, eu agradeço a oportunidade de participar deste evento da C40. São Paulo tem 460 anos, mas foi somente no século XIX, devido a mudanças na estrutura econômica do Brasil, que o processo de urbanização na cidade começou a se acelerar, acompanhado de um rápido crescimento populacional. E de forma vertiginosa e irreversível, a partir de meados do século XX, São Paulo transformou-se em uma metrópole industrial e na maior cidade do país. Em 1950, a cidade já possuía 2,2 milhões de habitantes espalhados por toda a região, num processo de expansão desordenada e sem planejamento urbano. Hoje, somos quase 12 milhões de habitantes e integramos, juntamente com outras 38 cidades, a região metropolitana de São Paulo, a qual conta com um total de 20 milhões de pessoas. É nessa realidade complexa, em escala extraordinária, que trabalhamos. Quando assumimos o governo da cidade, em janeiro de 2013, optamos por adotar políticas públicas integradas e estruturantes, com foco principal na redução das desigualdades socioterritoriais do município. Para isso, era preciso definir uma nova estratégia de ocupação e uso do solo, que combatesse a especulação imobiliária e garantisse o acesso à moradia digna e outros direitos básicos de cidadania. Esta missão norteou nossa proposta de revisão do Plano Diretor Estratégico da cidade. Tendo em vista o atual padrão periférico de urbanização da cidade, o plano diretor foi pautado em uma estratégia de cidade mais justa, inclusiva e sustentável, adotando os conceitos de cidade compacta e de cidade para todos. A prefeitura preocupou-se, então, em reorganizar o uso e ocupação do solo nas áreas densamente urbanizadas e nas áreas de proteção ambiental. Como esta apresentação está inserida no contexto da rede Comunidades Sustentáveis, vou expor alguns componentes do Plano Diretor Estratégico que prevê medidas para a sustentabilidade ambiental e urbana da cidade que, acredito, conseguirão contribuir para o nosso debate. No viés ambiental do plano diretor, apontamos 2 grandes eixos de sustentabilidade. Primeiro, a criação de áreas de proteção e recuperação ambiental. E segundo, a reestruturação do sistema de mobilidade urbana. No primeiro caso, foi definida a macrozona de proteção e recuperação ambiental, com o objetivo de preservar o patrimônio ambiental existente, principalmente os mananciais de água, e de resolver os problemas urbanos e sociais existentes nestas áreas. A macrozona de proteção e recuperação ambiental, em sua totalidade, possui solos frágeis e abrange 55% do território do município de São Paulo. Nela vivem 3,2 milhões de habitantes, ou seja, 39% da população total do município. Esta macrozona está distribuída nas fronteiras do município de São Paulo. Na parte norte, temos a maior reserva de mata atlântica da cidade, nas quais as favelas e loteamentos irregulares avançam sobre as matas e encostas de morros. Na parte sul, encontra-se a maior parte da área de mananciais que abrange 2 bacias hidrográficas de grande porte, onde as favelas e loteamentos irregulares também avançam, e onde há atividade de agricultura familiar. Na porção leste, há grande quantidade de nascentes de rios e córregos que se encontram poluídos. Nesse território, existe grande quantidade de favelas e loteamentos irregulares, ocupados com moradias de população de baixa renda que vive em situações graves de vulnerabilidade, totalizando 1,4 milhão de pessoas. Para prover moradia digna e segura a esta população, propõe-se implementar zonas especiais de interesse social, um instrumento urbanístico que visa incluir a cidade real na regulação e no planejamento público, ao mesmo tempo em que irá garantir maior sustentabilidade urbana. As zonas especiais prevêem a urbanização, regularização fundiária e recuperação ambiental das áreas com favelas e loteamentos irregulares, além de realocar moradores de áreas de risco para novas moradias construídas em locais adequados, com acesso a saneamento básico, energia, escolas, hospitais e toda a infraestrutura urbana necessária. Além disso, a macrozona também oferece potencialidades turísticas e agrícolas que deverão ser aproveitadas. É possível utilizar as áreas para implantação de parques e grandes equipamentos de lazer em diferentes pontos. As áreas com rios e vegetações densas podem ser utilizadas para o desenvolvimento de pesquisa e turismo ecológico, em diálogo e apoio às comunidades indígenas que ainda vivem no local. Ademais, há 435 produtores agrícolas na macrozona sul, que cultivam cerca de 50 km². A maior parte são agricultores familiares, obtendo renda da comercialização dos seus produtos agrícolas, que podem ajudar a abastecer feiras livres, a merenda escolar e restaurantes populares com alimentos naturais e saudáveis. O segundo eixo ambiental do Plano Diretor Estratégico é a estruturação de um sistema de mobilidade urbana sustentável. Uma das principais causas dos problemas de mobilidade existente no município de São Paulo é a superconcentração de empregos nas áreas mais centrais da cidade. Em 2011, dos mais de 4 milhões de empregos formais, 62% estavam nos distritos do centro expandido. Milhões de pessoas que vivem nos bairros da periferia se dirigem todos os dias para a área central, enfrentando avenidas congestionadas e transporte coletivo superlotado. Diariamente são realizadas 18 milhões de viagens motorizadas na cidade. Os carros particulares transportam o equivalente a 2,7 milhões de pessoas, enquanto os ônibus transportam cerca de 4,5 milhões de pessoas. Por isso, decidimos priorizar definitivamente o transporte público e coletivo. Existem hoje na cidade 120 quilômetros de corredores exclusivos de ônibus e 308 quilômetros de faixas exclusivas de ônibus, sendo que 290 quilômetros destas faixas foram implantadas somente no ano passado. Isso representou um ganho de quase 50% na velocidade média dos ônibus, o equivalente à redução de 38 minutos por dia no tempo de viagem dos passageiros. O novo plano diretor estratégico prevê a construção de uma rede de transporte coletivo de média e alta capacidade, composta por linhas de metrô, trens, monotrilhos e os corredores exclusivos de ônibus. Cabe ressaltar que nestes corredores circularão veículos adequados com fontes de energia renováveis e tecnologias menos poluentes. Esses corredores de ônibus foram projetados também para serem vetores de desenvolvimento urbano nos bairros, onde poderá haver maior adensamento construtivo e populacional. Com a construção deste sistema de transporte, o entorno será ocupado por uso residencial e não residencial, e pela convivência entre diferentes grupos sociais. Com essas iniciativas, pretendemos ampliar espaços de inclusão social, reforçando o uso dos espaços públicos pelos moradores da cidade e aproximando as distâncias entre casa, trabalho e lazer. Em apoio ao plano diretor da Prefeitura, o governo federal anunciou um grande e inédito aporte de investimentos, totalizando 3,3 bilhões de dólares. Destes, 1,24 bilhões serão para mobilidade urbana, e 900 milhões de dólares para a recuperação de mananciais das águas que abastecem a cidade. Além disso, serão investidos 577 milhões de dólares em obras de drenagem urbana e 600 milhões de dólares em 20 mil habitações de um programa habitacional conhecido como Minha Casa, Minha Vida. É importante destacar que todo o processo de elaboração do plano diretor foi feito de forma participativa, com envolvimento direto da sociedade. O processo de revisão do plano foi dividido em 3 etapas. A primeira, uma consulta pública envolvendo os cidadãos, academia, setor privado e movimentos sociais. Em seguida, as sugestões foram compiladas, analisadas e incorporadas à versão final. Ao todo, foram recebidas 3.522 propostas. Acreditamos que planejar o desenvolvimento da cidade não pode ocorrer de forma isolada ou distante da sociedade. Pelo contrário, é somente com a participação ativa e organizada dos cidadãos que se podem alcançar as metas ambiciosas de melhoria da vida urbana. Quero encerrar reafirmando que sabemos que a tarefa de tornar uma cidade mais sustentável não é fácil. Para grandes desafios são necessárias soluções inovadoras. A cidade de São Paulo acredita que a cooperação internacional é um dos melhores caminhos para buscar boas práticas e soluções para as cidades. Iniciativas como essa, da C40, que unem governos e cidades em torno de desafios comuns, são essenciais. Muito obrigada.
Thank you, Nádia. I'd now like to invite Mr. Kanglin, who is the Vice Chairman of the Standing Committee of Beijing Municipal People's Congress, to address you. Please make him welcome.
尊敬的主持人、女士们、先生们，大家下午好。非常高兴出席本届峰会。首先，请允许我代表北京市，对第5届世界大城市气候变化峰会的召开表示热烈祝贺。自 C40 创建以来，为加强世界大城市间的合作，共同应对全球气候变化做出了重要贡献。今天我们很乐意同各位代表共同分享北京市在改善环境质量、促进城市可持续发展方面的措施和进展情况。 北京是中国的首都，是一座快速发展的特大城市，地域面积为1.64万平方公里。截止2013年底，常住人口达到2114.8万，人均地区生产总值超过了1.5万美元，机动车保有量达到540万辆，能耗达到7300万吨标煤，其中燃煤使用量2100万吨。经济社会的快速发展，给城市环境和可持续发展带来了巨大的压力。其中，空气质量问题是公众最关心的环境问题之一，也是北京市面临的最大环境挑战。面对这些压力，北京市以筹办和举办2008年奥运会为契机，提出了绿色奥运理念。奥运会后，北京市又提出了建设绿色北京的目标，制定了绿色北京行动计划，把保护环境、应对气候变化和发展经济放在同等重要的位置，坚持在发展中解决环境问题。我们的主要做法是：一、积极调整产业结构，大力发展高新技术产业、现代服务业等产业，痛下决心淘汰落后的生产工艺以及不符合首都要求的企业。首钢、焦化厂等400多家高污染、高耗能企业相继停产和搬迁，产业结构不断优化升级。第三产业比重目前达到了76.9%。二、改善能源结构，天然气供应量从1998年的3亿立方米增长到2013年的105亿立方米。核心区24.5万户居民采暖实现了煤改电。中心城区1.7万台20蒸吨以下的燃煤锅炉全部改用天然气等清洁能源，建设4大燃气热电中心替代燃煤电厂，已有2座投入运营。2013年，清洁优质能源比重达到77%。三、提高能源利用效率，在电力、冶金、建材、石化等高耗能企业开整节能审计和改造，制定了建筑节能标准，要求新建筑节能达到65%。在原有建筑中逐步开展节能改造，经过努力，万元 GDP 能耗持续下降，年均下降5.8%。四、加快治理机动车污染，更新淘汰5万辆老旧出租车、1万多辆公交车、17万辆社会黄标车、95万辆O1、O2 老旧车辆。1999年以来，平均比全国提前2年执行更加严格的机动车排放标准及配套油品标准。2013年开始执行相当于O5标准的机动车标准和油品标准，与欧洲现行标准一致。全市1462座加油站，1387辆油罐车，52座储油库完成油气回收治理改造。五、优先发展公共交通，加快轨道交通建设。地铁总里程从2001年的40公里增加到2013年的465公里。2013年，中心城区公交出行比例 达到46%。6. 加强生态保护和建设，山区、平原和城市绿化隔离地区的3道绿色生态屏障基本建成，实施平原地区100万亩大造林、市区大绿地建设。2013年，全市森林覆盖率、林木绿化率分别达到40%和57.4%，城市生态环境明显改善。7. 加大宣传教育，提高公众环境意识，在全市推行有利于节约资源、保护环境的低碳生活方式和消费方式，不断增强全社会保护环境、应对气候变化的意识。通过实施这些措施，北京在经济社会快速发展的同时，环境质量得到改善，空气质量连续15年改善，主要污染物浓度全面下降，城市的可持续发展能力得到提高，实现了经济社会与环境治理的共同发展，为减少温室气体的排放和适应气候变化做出了积极贡献。2013年，中国中央政府提出要将生态文明建设融入经济建设、政治建设、文化建设和社会建设中，建设美丽中国。北京市以生态文明建设为统领，以保障市民健康为出发点，提出了以防治 PM2.5 污染为重点的2013至2017清洁空气行动计划。计划在5年的时间内实施84项重点污染防治措施，到2017年实现空气中的 PM2.5 浓度比2012年下降25%以上的目标。2014年1月22日，北京市第14届人民代表大会第2次会议高票通过了《北京市大气污染防治条例》。该条例提出了以人为本、环境优先的理念，着力构建政府主导、企业施治、全民参与、社会监督的大气污染治理机制，并加大对违法行为的处罚力度。这是中国第一部关于大气污染防治的地方性法规，将为北京市的大气污染防治工作提供有力的法治保证。女士们、先生们，保护环境、建设宜居城市、走可持续发展道路是我们共同的选择。我相信，这次峰会将进一步深化北京与 C40城市间的交流与合作。北京愿意通过 C40这个平台，与各城市分享知识、经验和教训，共同为不断提高城市可持续发展水平而努力。预祝本届峰会圆满成功，谢谢。
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sun, and congratulations on a massive achievement. Now I'd like to welcome Benedict Chia. Benedict is the Director of the National Climate Change Secretariat in the City of Singapore. Please make him welcome.
Well, I would like to thank C40 and the organizers for inviting Singapore to share with everyone our efforts towards building a sustainable community. So as an introduction, Singapore is a very, very small city-state. We are an island, we are a lower-lying island. If you look at the size of Singapore on the map, east-west, we're only 50 kilometers. North-south, we are only 25 kilometers. Our square area is only about 700 square kilometers, which is pills in comparison to the earlier Beijing presentation where they said that they're up to 16,000 square kilometers. So we are tiny. We are also one of the most densely populated cities in the world. We have a population of 5.4 million people. Squeezed onto this island puts us at amongst the top few cities in terms of urban density. And because of these two factors, Singapore is very vulnerable to climate change. We take climate change seriously because climate change in the form of more extreme weather patterns, in the form of rising sea levels, will affect us. And we have very little options in order to move our city to resettle our people. As a city-state, we lack a natural hinterland. So within our country itself, within our island itself, we squeeze not just urban buildings for people, buildings for businesses, we also have power stations. We have reservoirs, we have ports, we have airports, we even have military training areas and military exercise areas. So that's all squeezed into the little island of ours. Being a small island, we have limited access to alternative energies. We have done some estimates and we find that even if we put solar panels on all the usable roof space in Singapore, you're probably only going to get about 10% of our total energy needs. We have looked at nuclear power, but based on current safety standards, the safety evacuation zone of a nuclear power station, if there's any problems, would be the size of Singapore and beyond. Because of our unique circumstances, environmental sustainability to us since our formative years, since we gained independence and we became a city and a country, is not a choice, but it is a necessity. We don't have much land, we don't have much water resources, we don't have any local energy resources. So therefore, in our planning, in the way we grew, we have to make best use of our resources. We have to be very, very careful in terms of where we put our industries, where we put our ports, where we put our residential buildings. We have taken an integrated approach to urban planning, taking a 50-year sort of time frame, looking ahead. Singapore is also one of the key pioneers in terms of road pricing. We introduced it in 1975. In terms of our fuel mix, we made a dramatic switch from fuel oil, which is not a very clean form of fossil fuel, to natural gas. So we jumped from 19% in 2000 to 84% in 2012. Even though we are small, we have 50% green cover, and in terms of our sustainable water, we have closed the water loop. So in the past, Singapore used to rely on reservoir water and imported water, and that's not sufficient to meet our needs. So we have tapped on advanced membrane technologies. We have tracked the technologies and we adopted it into Singapore. And what we've done with it was we closed the water loop. We recycle our used water. We also use the same technology and apply it for desalination. So we have dramatically lowered the energy costs and the carbon emissions resulting from desalination, which traditionally is a very energy-intensive process. Looking ahead, Singapore recognizes that climate change is not just an environmental issue. It has moved beyond that. It is about the economy, it's about housing, it's about transport, it's about how we grow our economy, how we prosper in a sustainable manner. And because of this, we have formed an interministerial committee on climate change, supported by the outfit which I come from, the National Climate Change Secretariat, which sits in the Prime Minister's office. This takes a whole of government and a strategic view towards climate change by bringing all the key government agencies on board to tackle this issue. We have about 1.5 years ago put out a national climate change plans, and our 4 key thrusts on addressing climate change is on reduction of emissions, adapting to the impact, harnessing green growth opportunities, and forging 3P partnerships. And 3P here stands for people sector, public sector, and private sector, which I'll elaborate more in the next few slides that follow. So to give everybody a feel of what we have done in this strategy document, within the strategy document, we have in place 80% green buildings target by 2030. This is a significant improvement from the 20% we have right now. And we are going to achieve this target by setting standards, by putting in place incentives, monetary incentives, floor area incentives, as well as making it compulsory for building owners to measure and report to the government their energy use. An interesting thing here, which I'd like to highlight, is very recently we have included in our standards this thing called a certification renewal. This is an acknowledgement of the fact that it is one thing to design a green building, but it's another thing if the occupants of the building are not practicing energy efficient practices. They turn their aircons on and they use energy in an inefficient manner. So our standards are not static standards, they need to be renewed every 3 years. And if they don't meet certain requirements after 3 years, the standards do not get renewed. And by law, they are required to improve their green performance such that they can meet those standards. But buildings are just one thing. We need to look beyond buildings to look at the urban landscape. And for us, we integrate our urban planning together with our transport planning to reduce the amount of emissions that is being generated from commuting. So in Singapore, we are one of the most densely populated cities, and if you look at the amount of energy we use for transport, it is amongst the lowest. But we are planning to stretch these boundaries further. We are looking to increase our public transport share to 75% by 2030. It's currently about 60%, and in order to do that, we'll double our rail network, and we'll improve our bus services such that 8 to 10 homes will be located within a 10-minute walk of a train station. We are also putting in place cycling facilities. We have a plan to have 700-kilometer island-wide cycling lanes in an island of about 700 square kilometers, which for us, it is a big challenge, but it's something which we are still pushing. We are also pushing the boundaries through technology. So we work with top universities around the world to explore developing solutions that help us address climate change. These universities listed here have all set up a presence in Singapore. We also work with UNEP for a collaboration center. So just to give you a few, UNEP and Berkeley below work on building energy efficiency. University of Cambridge is on chemical processes, low carbon chemical processes. Technical University of Munich, we work with them on electromobility, electric vehicles. Peking University, we are working with them on carbon capture and utilization. Shanghai Jiaotong, we are working with them on waste to energy technologies. ETH, MIT, these are more transdisciplinary outfits. They look at environmental sensing, future of urban mobility, macro planning, parameters on how you can plan your city such that it uses a lot less energy. We see Singapore as a living lab for test bedding solutions. So in Singapore, because we are small, we are compact, we test bed leading edge technologies. We build smarter grids, zero energy buildings, electric vehicles, as well as solar PV, even though there's a limit to how much we can do. So currently, right now in Singapore, we've got about 12 megawatts of solar capacity. And recently, we have raised the intermittent generation threshold capacity to 600 megawatt peak. And we are seeing how that can be further improved with technology. So we are working with industry, we are working with the people sector to increase deployment of solar in Singapore. Some of the technologies which have been developed are also being deployed in existing housing estates. So this is green print we have for a precinct within the city. And here we deploy new technologies like fuel cells, LED lights, green roofs, with very specific improvements. So for solar panels and for fuel cells, we're looking at 60% reduction and net zero energy use. LED light, 30% energy reduction consumption. Biking facilities, we integrate biking facilities. So you promote cycling and you get more people to cycle and walk instead of driving. While the government can take the lead on some of these things, the private sector also has to do its part. And there are a number of private sector companies in Singapore working to address climate change. And here I'd like to highlight two things. First, one of the most important things about private sector involvement is getting them to measure and report on their sustainability, on their emissions, on their energy use. Because if you don't report and you don't measure, you won't know what you can do to reduce emissions. The other key thing which has been highlighted in the earlier presentation is about changing mindsets, changing behaviors, encouraging people to practice more climate-friendly practices. So one of the key companies, which is our power station in Singapore, is working with its customers on more energy-efficient practices. And this is quite rare because most of the time, power companies would rather sell you more power than to encourage you to be more energy-efficient and buy less power from them. But In the 3P strategy, the last P is probably the most important piece, really engaging the people sector. The community must ultimately be involved. Cannot be just the government taking the lead on addressing climate change. So in our climate change strategy documents, we have very, very active consultations with the public sector, with the people sector. We hear views. And we also encourage community groups who are willing to do more, able to do more in the local context, to do more. So for example, Southwest Community Group in Singapore, they have a community initiative to plant 1 million trees and shrubs by 2018. And my last slide, and which is really something I'd like to highlight, is for us in Singapore, sustainability, environmental sustainability has been our way of life since we were formed because of our unique circumstances. But with climate change, I think it's important for all cities to view environmental sustainability as a necessity rather than a choice. And for us, it is very important to engage the 3P sectors, the people sector, the private sector, and the public sector. And this, for us, going forward, is our key strategy. How do we work and synergize the inputs of these 3 sectors in terms of co-creating and implementing and driving climate change action in Singapore? Thank you.
Thank you, Benedict, and may I congratulate you. I do know that in Melbourne we quite often look to Singapore for inspiration on the way you do things. I hope occasionally Singapore looks back at us too. Now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, the Vice Mayor of the City of Stockholm, Ankersjö. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak about my city. And I've been listening to the previous speakers with great interest. It's striking how we share the same goal, and at the same time we have different ways to face that goal, and we have especially different tools in our toolbox. And I was asked specifically to mention some of the tools we use in Stockholm. I will do that in the end of my speech. But first, if this can get this to work. If I press the right button, it does work. Some background facts about Stockholm. We have about 900,000 residents right now. We are one of the fastest growing cities in Europe right now. So that means in Stockholm we grow by 17,000 residents each year. And that is a lot for a city like Stockholm. We have been dealing with the challenge of combining economic growth with a decrease in CO2 emissions. And we've been quite successful with that. Now is the next challenge, that is to make sure that Stockholm grows in a sustainable way when it grows at that fast pace as we do right now. 25% of Stockholmers live in the city's dense urban core, and it's very attractive to live in the urban core in Stockholm. That's not the case in every city around the world, but it is in Stockholm. But the majority live in low-density modernist suburbs along the metro lines, mainly. The suburbs are mainly single-use residential areas. And the urban core is 4 to 20 times as dense as its surroundings. Now we have 2 challenges, and that is to accommodate our rapid growing population and to expand the city in a sustainable way. And the way we choose to do it is the walkable city, we call it. Every municipality in Sweden has to have a new city plan every 10 years. And our latest city plan is called the walkable city. What we mean by the walkable city is to build a city that is attractive everywhere and where you can walk, bicycle, or at least go by public transport everywhere in the city. And by doing that, we try to make the whole of the city as attractive as the dense core is today, and to make other parts as dense as the urban core is. So what we're doing is that we're building mixed-use dense neighborhoods and attractive streets. Also economically productive neighborhoods that is built for pedestrian, cyclists, and public transport, as I mentioned. And what we say is that we will try to put an end to modernism, even though some people seems to be provoked by that. What we are doing right now, we have this aim to build 140,000 new homes in Stockholm until the year 2030. And that is quite a challenge for us. And it's, of course, very important that we do it in the right way, to put those homes at the right places and not build a car-dependent city. Stockholm has had those challenges for a long time. I mean, the earlier century, we tended to have an urban sprawl and to build a city that is dependent on cars. We're trying to change that now. So what we're seeing now is that when it comes to political conditions, that helps us. We have this growing housing shortage, which is a bad thing, but the good thing with it is that it's easy to make the case that we need to build and where we need to build when it comes to people who don't want to build, for example. We have a new political consensus about building a non-car-based growth in Stockholm. And that is quite fresh and recent, because that has not always been the case. I guess you all have your stories about conflicts when it comes to the place of the car in the city. Right now, the political parties in Stockholm have a consensus that we will try to make more space for pedestrians and bicyclists and less space for cars. That is quite fascinating. We have had some other things to help us along the way. We became the first ever European Green Capital in Europe in 2010. And that, along with our commitment to organizations like C40, it's very important to us to be a part of this. And it also, and that is important for you to know, that it's very important when it comes to the climate in the debate at home, that we can see that Stockholm does some things rather good, and we get credit for it. And the people of Stockholm are proud of that, not to mention the politicians of Stockholm, so that makes it quite easy as well. We have our eco-districts, and we had Hammarby Sjöstad, which was our first eco-district. We started building that 15 years ago. Now we are building the Royal Seaport project, and those eco-districts function as test beds for new solutions, new technology, but also new solutions when it comes to urban planning, which helps us to build a walkable city. And of course, we also have politics, individual political actors that make big difference by taking the debate. We have to do this. And to come to the subject of the powers we have in our toolbox, well, there are some unique things about the municipalities in Sweden, and one is that we actually collect the majority of the taxes. We collect the income tax. We have to give some of it away to the national level, I'm sorry to say, but we can keep a rather fair part of it. And of course, financial strength is, of course, something that really helps. We have a land use and planning monopoly. We have a rather strong say when it comes to planning in Sweden. At least that is for now. And we have the opportunity to own 70% of the land in Stockholm. That means that we have a major say in who builds what and where in the city. And that means that we can put demands on what is being built in Stockholm. I think we have one of the world's hardest demands when it comes to energy efficiency. That is something we are allowed to have at this moment, but we have a debate and a discussion in Sweden, which could, as a worst case scenario, lead to that we lose some of those powers, which would be really a sad thing, I think, for Sweden and for Stockholm. So we are fighting to keep those opportunities we have. And we also, what we do is that we often co-finance infrastructure investments. And for example, what we are doing now in Stockholm, the 10 years to come, is that we are going to build 9 more metro stations in the city of Stockholm. So the plan is to build more housing along the metro lines, and of course along the 9 new metro stations as well, to build a more city core-like structure along the metro lines. And we have, well, of course, a rapid population growth means high demand for construction, and that means that, well, it is a rather nice discussion climate between the city and the constructions and all the stakeholders, and that means that they are willing to follow the lead from the city. So, To end this speech, I will just say some things about something that we are very proud of from Stockholm. We are a proud innovative city, a member of C40, and we also are a leadership city, along with Sao Paulo, for the City for Climate Positive Network. And that is something that I think is really important work. We had a workshop session last year in November, I think it was. I had the pleasure to open that, and we had the guests from all the cities you can see on the slide there, and discussed a lot of important issues when it comes to sustainable planning of the city, and at least, not least when it comes to measuring our carbon dioxide emissions, and to do that in a way that we can compare to each other, and also take the discussion on whether how we should measure and what we should measure when it comes to what we produce in the city, and also what we consume in the city, and so on. Very interesting topics, and I would like to encourage you to have contact with Thomas Gustafsson from Stockholm, sitting over there, who is in charge of this work from Stockholm side. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to the debate. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Ankersjö. Per brought to your attention the Stockholm's leadership of the climate positive network. What I neglected to mention in my introduction, sorry there? I will in a minute, is that this session is actually bringing together two networks, the network which is led by Stockholm and the Sustainable Urban Development Network, which is led by Melbourne, together into this session on sustainable communities. I'd now like to ask all of our speakers to come back to the platform, and we'll have a question and answer session. The way we're going to do this is the traditional way. You have to put your hand up if you want to ask a question, and wait for Zach, who's standing on our right, with the microphone to come over to you. When you ask your question, could you please indicate which of the panelists you are addressing your question to? Who's going to go first? The back.
Good afternoon, thank you. My question is posed at the gentleman from Singapore. I forgot his name. Yes.
Benedict, Chia.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I heard you talking about the involvement of communities in all these projects, and which is also a challenge with us in our communities in Soweto, where I come from. How are you doing that? Because it's really difficult to make communities aware about the impacts of the environment into their lives. So when you speak of such things, it's like you're talking Greek to them, they don't understand. So what strategies or mechanisms are you using in making sure that you get the communities on board? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for the question. I think the starting point in which we get our communities on board is that when we develop national, or rather climate change action plans, there are extensive consultations which go on for 4 to 6 months on average. And we have multiple channels in which we reach out to the community. So we have consultations through internet portals, which is important because there are a lot of Singaporeans who live outside Singapore and abroad, and who are very interested in contributing their ideas to what can be done in Singapore. And their views are of particular interest to us because living abroad, you see some of the best practices in other cities around the world, and they always flag it out to us that, oh, this city which I'm living in is doing this university which I'm in has these action plans. But we also have, so that's one channel, the internet portal. The other channel is to really hold town hall meetings where we get our mayors to chair meetings with the community groups, and these are open to anyone who is interested in attending. So they come for the discussions, there is a plenary session, and they get to raise their views on what they think can be done, how much further things can be stretched. And I suppose the last channel is really more focus group stakeholder discussions, whereby you invite certain experts, you invite members of the community in, and they speak and they have a discussion on a very, very specific topic. That's leading up to the plan, but even after the plan has been formed, we are very, very open to discussions, and we are trying to reach out to the community through newer platforms such as new media, Facebook, which allow people to contribute ideas almost on a daily basis. So if you have something interesting, you can go to Climate Change Singapore Facebook, and you can just put the idea out, and there'll be a group of people discussing it, and interesting and good ideas are always being incorporated into the next revision of the climate change plan. So these are various channels in which we bring the community on board. And we also give community groups flexibility to execute and develop plans on their own. So within a small group of, within a small community, if they think they can do more, we encourage them, they put forward plans, action plans that stretch and go beyond what the city-level wide plan is.
Thank you, Benedict. Thank you for your question. The next question was from Monica Baroni, CEO of the City of Sydney.
Thank you. My question is for Sao Paulo. We've heard a lot today about the need to change the narrative a little bit about what we're doing so that people understand that this work encompasses creating good economic outcomes, good social outcomes. I'm just wondering how you, and maybe other panelists too, are having those conversations with communities to engage them in understanding, and whether there is an understanding that this is something that will also lead to the alleviation of poverty, and whether that is engaging communities, whether and it is working in communities when you've got these issues.
Acho que eu não compreendi a pergunta quando ela diz como estão sendo envolvidas. Como? Involucrando, que é? Ah, sim. Como entendi que como as comunidades estão participando dos processos de mudança. Não sei se compreendi bem a pergunta. Bom, nós procuramos em todas as... Nós buscamos que em todos os processos maiores de mudança que envolvem acordos e pactos feitos na cidade como um todo, é preciso haver um processo de participação anterior. Então, nós temos muitos mecanismos já legais pela legislação da cidade que obrigam que a Prefeitura Municipal, a Municipalidade, realize inúmeras audiências públicas abertas para que todos os projetos sejam debatidos. Eu dei o exemplo do plano diretor da cidade, em que nós fizemos debates nas 32 regiões da cidade, e depois fizemos debates também por temas, também os debates temáticos. Além disso, nós temos feito uma consulta pública pela internet que tem tido muitos êxitos. A municipalidade coloca na internet o plano básico para debate e recebe em cada tópico, cada artigo do projeto, recebe sugestões, propostas, modificações. Então, esse conjunto de opiniões, de sugestões, que vem das audiências públicas, vem de apresentação de propostas diretas, fazem parte da elaboração que depois vai a voto nas instâncias de decisão. Além disso, é o processo de diálogo permanente que nós temos através de conselhos participativos comunitários, que existem em todas as áreas, na educação, na saúde, na habitação, no meio ambiente, e existem também conselhos de representantes em cada uma das subprefeituras da cidade. Então, essa é um pouco a rede de consultas públicas que nós adotamos.
May I? Okay. I think that is something that we struggle with in all cities, or at least the ones I know of, how to involve people in change. I could for surely say that in Stockholm we need to be better to involve businesses and to involve academia. And we're learning and doing that. But what we all are struggling with is to involve the people who live in the areas. And that is kind of hard. I think that is something that we should really put focus on sharing experiences with. When it comes to the case I presented with building 140,000 new homes in the city of Stockholm, where people are quite happy with how this Stockholm looks like. We have lots of greens, we have lots of water, and of course to put new buildings in there could be full of conflicts. And what we have been trying is to have more open meetings, and not just information meetings, but also meetings like open space meetings, workshops with people who live in those areas. And those meetings have shown to be quite successful, actually. They have actually led to, I mean, in Stockholm, in Sweden, you can always comply and have a long juridical process when it comes to building things. And what we've seen that it could shorten that process if you have the right kind of meetings before. So we're learning, and I think that is something that I would be glad to hear more best practice from you all when it comes to that matter.
Thank you, Per, and thank you, Nádia. I think we have a question in the back row, second back row.
Thank you. My question is to the Assistant Mayor from Stockholm. You made mention that the city owns about 70% of the land in Stockholm. My question is more on how did you manage to get that right, based on issues of pressures from development and the whole process of alienation of public open spaces? Because I think those are one of the critical challenges we face, that every day there's pressure for development that is aligned to the economic development of the city. But to have you guys still controlling 70%, I think it's a milestone. How did you get it correct? Thank you.
So the main question was, how did we get all that land? Well, but it's kind of historical reasons. Sweden is a kingdom, and some of the land comes from the king. Some of the lands come from for 40, 50 years ago, Stockholm bought a lot of land around Stockholm in order to be able to build housing. So actually, we bought land from the neighboring municipalities. And that is the explanation. I guess there are more explanations, but those are the main two explanations. So, of course, that makes it kind of easy for us to. I mean, we have a lot of saying when it comes to how our land is used. But as I mentioned, we also face the challenge of having a national government who thinks we have too tough demands when it comes to energy efficiency and so on, and are worried that it will make building houses that we will not be able to build so many houses because we have those high standards and high demands. But Stockholm has proven that is not the case. We can do both, and we shouldn't put two good things against another. I hope that was a sufficient answer.
Thank you, Per. I think we have time for one more question. So.
Yes, thank you. I think Mr. Bloomberg referred to it during the previous sessions, is that when it comes down to the communication with citizens, the question arises quite urgently is how does it affect me on the short term? What's the impact on my daily livelihood? My question to the panel in general is, how do you package certain climate actions in order to create commitment and to create awareness and willingness to change among the population.
Who would like to answer?
Well, I just want to make one point, and if you look at climate change action, one of the lowest hanging fruits around is that on energy efficiency. And almost all the energy efficiency measures we're talking about are actually negative costs. They make economic sense to do, even if suddenly tomorrow people will say, the scientists will suddenly to agree that there's no climate change. It is something worth doing, it is something that we should do. So in packaging our message across, we always highlight to consumers, to businesses, that if you implement energy efficiency practices, you will not only get to reduce costs, but you will also be less vulnerable to the fluctuations in energy prices that happens globally. So that's a big plus to them. But of course, one challenge of addressing energy efficiency is the upfront cost tends to be very much higher. Though over the lifespan, you probably pay back within 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what you're looking at. So we are also helping them increase their awareness, understand what are the options available, and if possible, just tap on them, because this is really the lowest hanging fruit, which is left not addressed in a lot of other countries. And in some cities and countries, we find that this is preferred compared to going for other more expensive and probably more exciting options, like certain renewable energy options, which can be very costly.
If I may add on this same topic of energy efficiency, and it is low-hanging fruit, in our circumstance, we have a mandatory disclosure of energy efficiency rating of commercial buildings when they're sold or leased. That's a very important motivator in a commercial marketplace for people to understand that this is an issue that matters. It also makes it quite possible for cities like my own and the City of Sydney to provide information into that marketplace as to how they might make that change. So complementing what Benedict has said, but emphasising that if you either have regulation, and we don't necessarily do totally, or if you have disclosure and transparency, you've made a very significant step forward in the realisation of people as to what they can do. With that short speech, I think we've come to the end of our question time. Would you please all join with me in thanking all of our panellists. And before we go, I'd like to mention that on the screen you can see a screenshot of the C40 exchange, which all member cities of C40 have access to. All of the information that will be been in this will be displayed within the C40 exchange. And I'd also like to extend my thanks, and on behalf of you, our thanks to the Initiative Director for Sustainable Communities, Zach DeFice, who has put this session together, helped all of us to get here, prepped us all, and managed the microphone. Thank you, Zach. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the breakout session is now concluded. Please be sure to leave your headsets behind, as there will be headsets available in each room. The plenary session, Climate Proofing